Getting creative with data-driven frameworks. Hello, and welcome to our webinar today on getting creative with data-driven frameworks, where we are going to look at the new creative brief to personalize creative at scale, an introduction to data-driven creative frameworks, and creative best practices for real-time feeds. Implementing a personalization initiative using data-driven messaging is fundamentally a change management exercise. It requires you to adopt new paradigms, build new organization capabilities, develop new processes, and learn new technology. As with any new skill, it takes time. But if we think of it as a crawl, walk, run process, once you do it a couple of times, gradually layering in increased complexity, you get better and better at it. For the beginners, we are going to show you how to get started. For those of you a bit further down the path, we are going to show you some best practices to help you get to the next level. Data-driven messaging takes the information a brand has around a given consumer or a subset of consumers and tailors the brand's messaging to unique needs, situations, and contexts. At its core, data-driven messaging centers on 4 lines of questions. 1. Who are my audiences? What are the key subsegments within each of these audiences that may have different needs? 2. What are those consumers' needs and how do they change across time and context? 3. What combination of messages will resonate with those relevance opportunities where need, context, and time intersect? What messaging will communicate how the brand promise is relevant to the consumer, both in the moment and in the future? 4. What data is available to make these decisions? How the brand can recognize their consumer and their relevance opportunity. The answer to these questions form the basis of a messaging strategy. The new creative brief is not creating an entirely new brief, but the implementation of new key factors like time, consumer circumstance, and environment, and how this expands your original brief and messaging to reach those audiences with the right creative in the right moment. You have to ask the question, is it important to the way we speak to the consumer? Does the time of day matter, even the week? Or whether it's in the season of a particular sport? Or whether holidays are important in defining the message? What about sequencing? Are we making a case to a consumer over time, or are we storytelling? These are all time elements as well. Consumer circumstance speaks to the things that the consumer is experiencing when they see their creative. Are they at home or are they at work? Maybe in the car, or on a mobile device or a desktop or even connected TV? And what is their state of attention? Are they task focused or are they content focused? Any or all of these factors might influence the message that we want to deliver to the consumer at a given time or place, or even their circumstance. If you're thinking, man, the creative brief just got more complicated, you're right. But conversely, the real art is to find the simple big idea in that complication and choose the elements that are relevant to bring that idea to life. Here's an example of a recent Corona campaign. You may have seen it on TV. The TV ad talks about how the bottle of Corona earned its lime. In this dynamic video, each 6-second executions bring one of 300 different messages to life. A really nice way and execution on how each targeted by time and circumstance. The creative brief has grown and evolved, so we see the new creative brief consisting of a master brief with sub-briefs that help to break out some of the complexities to help teams focus on areas like video, display, or native that all align with the goals and KPIs of your master brief. This can also help when you are working with different teams within your organization or external partners who can access the sub-brief that they are focused on while still having visibility and direction from the master brief. Let's take a look at the master brief. In your master brief, we see areas like brand statement, audience, campaign goals, and key messaging as the drivers to what create the overall goals and objectives when we want our sub-briefs to align with. For each of the sub-briefs, like display or video, We want to then start defining the messaging audience and layer in time and circumstance to be able to build out the messaging architecture that speaks to this specific channel of your brief. As what we see for the story strategy for display may or will be different to that of video or native. Having a data section for your brief is essential to help you with your design thinking and collaboration between teams. It's important to understand what data and assets are available and will be used as part of your overall strategy. Having insight and access to image content, a product feed, or even weather feeds is essential for all teams involved. So what is data-driven creative? Any creative hosted on an integrated technology platform that's using data signals to update the messaging and the content of the creative in real time and then delivering that in one of three ways. Storytelling. By using sequential messaging, we can develop a personalized journey that speaks to our consumers as they appear in various stages of the funnel. Creative decisioning. We can use targeting strategies based on behavior and user data to help deliver a unique experience through content and messaging to a specific user at the right moment. And finally, dynamic creative assembly. Using a combination of targeting and data inputs like weather, APIs, or product feeds, we can update relevant content within our creative in real time that can speak to the user in the right time and moment. Think data equals personalization. Our objective is to collect all the information about the target audience that helps build out our strategy based on the data triggers. That will help us achieve our objective over our campaign. There are a few types of data signals to think about. Audience, like demographic, behavior, even search data. Media, like keyword, contextual targeting, or even media placement. And finally, environmental, so devices, operating systems, geolocation, weather, even time of day. It is important for creative teams to understand what data signals are going to be used within the campaign to build out our personalization strategy that helps define our key messaging for our consumers. By combining all of these data points, it can help generate the ideas and the concepts that help create that single big idea in the complication and choose the right elements that are relevant to bring to life. The quality of the creative is ultimately determines how your campaign will perform. So, what we need in addition to our data is a sound strategic approach to creative. Let's look at some approaches for developing your creative strategy. Use creative technology available to its fullest potential. Creative technologies have come a long way, and without it, we will be dealing with static content. So think rich animations and interactivity to attract your users' attention within those short few seconds your creative is first viewed. You also want to think about the delivery of your content and what platforms, browsers, and devices can help your creative speak to its user. We now have more options than ever with personalized video, AR, VR, mobile, even device features like accelerometers or pushing the boundaries to out-of-home experiences. Here's a great example of what's possible with creative technologies by bringing together an idea and with creativity and data and collaborating across different tech partners. We were asked if we could help with an idea for a dynamic campaign for McDonald's Monopoly. The key objective was to achieve app downloads and usage, but there were some significant challenges. Auto-optimize based on app engagement, audience buying based on app engagement for 3 DMP segments like new users, lapsed installers, and active users of the app. We then used those learnings to inform our creative used in the digital out-of-home displays. Using real-time audience segments, we connected key McDonald's tech partners like Kochava for mobile app tracking, Crux for the DMP, and the Trade Desk as our DSP that passed us back lat and long coordinates, which enabled us to pass out-of-home partners info about the best performing creative in a defined area. Dynamic creatives, we then developed one master creative framework enabling cost-effective production and efficiencies, where we created a version for each prize and had the ability to update messaging in real time. Inputs from the app tracking, enabling download and usage events, would be posted back to Flashtalking as data inputs for creative auto-optimization. Using the integration with Kochava enabled us to meet the challenge of auto-optimizing the dynamic creative based on app installs and engagement. Our geo-targeted connection with the trade desk enabled us to group the data behind the optimization into specific regions. Flashtalking automated a daily feed of regional performance data to 3 digital out-of-home companies, so the ads shown on the panels were the top performing online ads in that specific location. They received the top 3 creatives in a defined geographical area close to the out-of-home panels. Use data as a guide to build best practices and considerations. Dynamic creative means we can tailor our ads to individual consumers based off data inputs related to the product to keep the ad fresh, up to date, and relevant to the viewer. Once you get your feed set up, you can quickly and easily test different iterations of your creative and optimize in real time. It's not just about the personalized, relevant ad experience, it's also about the productivity and efficiency within your organization and how you'll update creative in real time to help map out your campaign life strategy, which can align to specific events like time of year, holiday, or even brand sales events. Personalize wherever possible. Great marketing starts and ends with what the audience wants. Use targeting and dynamic technology to deliver relevant and unique creative experiences to individual users by relying on your new creative brief to help understand your customer better around time, their environment, and circumstance, so we can cut through the noise in today's world. Relevance is key, as consumers get frustrated when content offers up creative or messaging that had nothing to do with their interests, which is why we need to personalize their experience with dynamic creative. Next, we want to achieve scale. The key to dynamic creative is building the framework that understands what assets and data inputs are going to drive and scale your creative content. This allows us to account for all the different creative variations, which then let us change the content in real time. It's not just text, it's not just images. You can make anything dynamic, even video. Change the color in real time, change the different types of animations, which we will explore in some more detail today. Collaboration between your teams and partners is imperative in order to ensure creative is always approached and presented in the way that it's going to look nice and represents your brand in a positive light. Careful considerations need to be put in your framework and understanding of the available assets and data. Keeping your creative fresh is critical to achieving scale, but also maintaining relevance. You want to be able to take advantage of personalization at the right time and in the right moment. Take advantage of your data to understand when your creative is underperforming and how and what to change to optimize its reach to your consumer. And finally, measure and iterate. If we don't know how our creative is performing, how can we improve upon that? We don't want to create a fragmented approach, as this can be a breeding ground for challenges like inefficiencies, performance obstacles, fragmented insights. Advertisers and agencies agree that managing campaigns across multiple platforms can be the most significant digital marketing challenge they face. Platforms like Flashtalking ease those woes because we offer integrated technology platforms where everything is in one place. Housing all of your work and all of your teams in the same platform makes it much easier to achieve measurable goals, which also allows for the streamlining of dynamic creative solutions. We have a great opportunity right now in advertising to help create and establish a positive emotional connection with our consumers by providing them with an immersive and personalized experience that gives them value and an attachment to your brand. That is the power of good creative and what all brands should be investing in. What is a creative framework? Everyone is familiar with static creative, the types of ads that have been around since the early days of the internet. As the name implies, static creatives are unchanging. All the consumers you target will see the same fixed ad or one of a few variations you might develop for testing purposes. Dynamic creatives, on the other hand, are ads whose content can change over the course of a campaign based on time and consumer circumstances. Every digital creative, be it static or dynamic, consists of multiple components or elements. For example, background colors, logos, images, headline text, and your CTA. A creative framework is responsible for defining how your content is displayed, moves, and reacts in a dynamic ad. A creative framework consists of one or more dynamic elements which can shape and format your dynamic content and represent it directly to your audience. In essence, it's the engine or controller that generates all of the creative versions that you want to show to your messaging audiences. Once your campaign is live, it also allows you to instantly update live ads without the need to retraffic. Some of you might hear the term template being used around the industry, but the difference between a template and a framework is that a template is a static and rigid environment with little control over your creative elements, versus a framework, which is designed to be a flexible engine that adds a layer of intelligence that can be used to control the dynamic elements within your creative. There are many different types of dynamic elements we can use, including text. From a simple text on a button to the messaging within our headline copy, dynamic text is the cornerstone of any dynamic framework. Images. We can swap in and out different images for products or destination shots as we need within our creative. And video. We can easily update and replace videos within the framework at any time. Let's look at some of the advanced dynamic elements within a framework. Rich loads can be used to dynamically pull in additional assets into your creative framework, allowing you to completely change the look and feel of your creative if needed. Optional frames, where we can change a creative from a 3 to a 5-frame story, or for efficiency, switch our creative to a single end frame to display that product or messaging sooner. True and false switches, which we can use to switch on and off elements like brands, logos, or even sales flags. Color and branding, having the ability to change the style and branding of your content to present a customized look and feel for different products, offers, or even audiences. Brand guidelines, larger clients with multiple brands or products under their main catalog may have their own brand guidelines and style requirements, so we can simply adapt those within our framework for each of those brands. Finally, animation, being able to have an entirely different animation to expand the creative reach of your content. In order to leverage these data elements, this is where the creative framework really comes into play, by giving you that control over your creative content. Now let us break down the parts of a framework to analyze the areas of flexibility and how this can help efficiencies during the production and always-on management of your dynamic initiatives. The framework, the architecture of the banner that contains the creative intelligence consisting of HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript, which really drives the intelligence of our banner. The base file is a version of the framework that is created for each size of your ad, like a 300 by 250 or a 728 by 90, that is based on the inputs from a manifest file. Variables, the components of the ad that can be dynamically changed, like background images, headline messaging, or CTA text. They are also used as placeholders for external feed data. An asset blueprint. We use an asset blueprint to describe a feed that is serving variables that may include imagery and other dynamic components, like product information or even weather. A feed can be used to drive all of the content within the framework or in conjunction with specified dynamic elements like headline messaging. Then we create a version, which is the creative banner. A version is a specific combination of banner components created by the data that is ingested into those variables. And finally, a rich load. This can dictate the look and feel of the banner. Rich loads allow for unique look and feel animation schemes or set the number of frames that live within a single version or base file. Let's look at how these all work together to deliver that personalized creative to a user. First, an impression is served. Our audience is identified and our decisioning rules determine what message and personalization should be shown to that user. Indicated message and personalization needed then determines the base file and spec to be used. The asset blueprint delivers any dynamic variables that live outside of the base files in rich load. An example, as we said, could be a product feed or weather feed. A rich load then determines the look and feel of the content or creative. And finally, our creative version is shown to the user being served the impression. Now that we have looked at the structure of the framework, let's explore the content within the creative setup. Creatives come in all shapes and sizes and have the ability to scale and flex based on the environment they are implemented across various sites and networks that respond to the device they are seen on. Your image assets need to fulfill a criteria in order to work well with other elements within your creative and help enhance those elements to create a balanced layout. Flexibility. We need to ensure you create your assets to fit a wide range of shapes and sizes and even devices. Optimization. Understand how compression affects different images and plan accordingly to be able to adapt your assets to retain the quality levels that you and the client expects. Motion. Think about your assets, how they should move, and create assets that support this as well as being supported across all devices. And finally, relevance. How will the asset complement the message or appeal to the user based on factors like location, time, or circumstance? This personalizes the message, adding relevance. Our research shows that specifying local geography lifts ad performance. When possible, insert physical location information into your creative, like a store location, address, or even a zip code. Planning your digital asset management and delivery is important not only for your designs, but also for scalability and real-time updates. In the same way as sharing and collaborating with any data feeds, teams need to understand what type of asset libraries they will have access to when it comes to creating large-scale dynamic frameworks. This can either be a data feed or a DAM, like a digital asset management platform, but there always should be an organized source of assets. Having a centralized location for your digital assets can help with efficiency, productivity, and quality control. But it also helps with scalability across your different channels and initiatives. To be able to distribute and collaborate on the same source assets with multiple teams and partners creates those efficiencies. What we have experienced is that creatives are designed with a single concept in mind and laid out beautifully in Photoshop, but with little consideration as to where and how the other 1,000 background images are going to come from and how they will fit into the aesthetics of the concept. We are then trying to find content to fit into our design rather than building our designs to be able to flex and flow around the content we are planning to ingest to create those hundreds, if not thousands, of unique versions for our users. When it comes to building our framework, you need to know what data you'll be utilizing and how it is used to inform your audience. In some cases, it's to deliver product type information. Other cases, it's used to be more informative to your audience. The source of the content used within the framework can be a mix of messaging architecture and a data feed. An example of the messaging matrix content, things like headlines, background images, even CTA, that align to specific groups or audiences, where the data feed would usually contain product information like product images, descriptions, and even price. If it's more informative, it could be like weather, geo, or even directions to a closest store that may relate to the targeted data for that user. Let us now look at some of the approaches, best practices, and limitations around feeds-driven creative and how best to think about the design and flexibility of your framework. Usually, a framework can be set up with a mix of dynamic content like headline or subheadline that speaks to a targeted user or audience. And the feed would populate the content based on triggers like known user behavior, trending products, geo, or even weather. Feeds allows you to harvest live data from an external source and push them directly into your creative framework. Some of the most common examples include product feeds, which allow us to retarget users with products they have previously viewed. Inventory feeds, which allow travel and hospitality advertisers to target users with messaging and imagery of certain hotel properties they may have viewed. And Tier 2 auto to present offers based on available inventory, maybe in a specific region. Sports feeds, which enable marketers to display live sports scores or upcoming schedules in their creatives. And finally, betting feeds, allowing gambling and sports betting companies to present the latest odds for an upcoming or live sporting event. When designing our frameworks, we need to have that collaboration with our teams so that we can access and understand the type of data and triggers that will inform our creative that adds in the layer of intelligence at the platform or the creative level. An example might be that our feed is providing us with the city and weather data. So based on this, our creative is going to assemble the assets that speak to this situation. So we could show an animation or a video of a car in that specific city and the current weather conditions in combination with the targeted messaging that speaks directly to that user in the moment. From a design perspective, having data sets or examples of data will help map out and understand the guidelines for creating multiple concepts under a single framework. Some things to consider when working with feeds are the use of images and text. Images can be large source images requiring modification or optimization in real time, and therefore require the use of an image service within our framework to pass parameters to the image to be able to scale it appropriately to fit within the creative layout. We also need to consider the focal point of all the thousands of images that are going to be pulled into our framework, which will create each unique version, as we cannot modify and adjust each individual version that is being driven by the feed. Text is another area, in that you should know what the shortest and longest pieces of text are from a data feed that may be used for things like city names or product descriptions, and agree on how this will be treated if it goes beyond its limits. In some cases, we ellipse the text or scale it to fit within the defined area. Knowing and getting buy-in on these limitations up front will help you and your team understand the flexibility of your framework and how you can plan to maintain, update, and activate relevance as and when needed. Let's talk about dynamic video. Dynamic video has evolved with feeds-driven creative, and personalized video content is growing. We are only able to scratch the surface today talking about personalized video, but don't worry, we will be hosting a deeper dive into this topic in the coming months. More and more users are consuming video content at home, on the go, through various devices. So with the growing distractions of our users, creating that personalized video that gets the attention of the consumer is key. When it comes to dynamic video, we now have the ability to inject or overlay additional personalized messaging and imagery to a user based on what we know about them. Typically, we would take the content that is repurposed from a TV spot, that might be a 30 or a 15-second video, and then try to overlay or change the last 3 to 5 seconds of the content to add that personalized touch. What brands and marketers need to start changing in their planning is understanding that video is its own deliverable as part of the new creative brief. And we need to think about how and what type of video we shoot at the start of the process and how that will translate for our various deliverables and audiences. Some brands are now understanding this and creating video for online initiatives, shooting 6, 10, or even 20-second videos that gives the scalability to create a really clean, personalized, and targeted creative for our users by giving creative partners the ability to seamlessly apply personalized content to fill the remaining 5 and 10 seconds of the video story. Thinking about the consumer's circumstance or environment and how they will consume the video content should factor into your storytelling. Think about, how does my story translate with no audio? Does the user still get my concept? How does music play a part in my story? Is it something people are going to share? Some current insights show that vertical video is a growing trend. 30% of people who turn their phones to view a horizontal video may only watch 14% of that video. 70% of vertical video ads are 15-second videos, while others are 6 seconds. And vertical video ads have shown to be 4 times more effective than horizontal video. With vertical video comes a change in our storytelling. We need to switch from the traditional horizontal way to tell our story to a vertical world where there are new ways to connect to the user through creativity in a vertical environment. Activating your creative framework across your campaign. Some strategies call for a set of creative versions that deliver based on targeting set up at the platform level, while others require a single version where the logic or intelligence is handled at the creative level, which we will explore here. This can be due to your targeting strategy at the platform or your creative intelligence, where decisioning is needed within the framework based on external data signals. Let's take a look at an example where we want to show the user the nearest store. We can set up our creative with a data feed that contains all of the brand's store locations, and then in our platform, using our geo triggers to know the user's location, we can serve them the nearest store. This is using the platform level targeting to achieve this. Now, if we want to take it a step further and know the user's location, but also give them distance and directions to that specific store, we need to use the data from our feed to give us the store location and then get the user's location to calculate the distance and directions in the creative in real time. This is an example of how platform and creative intelligence intersect. An example of where this can be used in different ways is being passed user-level data from the platform, so keywords for audiences like family or parents, sports enthusiasts like golfers, or travel for business people are then used to assemble our dynamic creative framework with the relevant images, text, and feed endpoints to create a targeted creative version. Other examples are used to change the look and feel of our creative entirely. Once you know upfront all the different layouts and concepts, you can use the triggers to load in different asset and content combinations, as well as setting specific functionality. Looking at this kayak example, we created one dynamic template that supported thousands of iterations of remarketing versions for kayak hotel, car, flights, package deals, and cross-selling. All 5 concepts can be used across different products and levels of site interaction, plugging into the Kayak API for imagery, pricing, and city and hotel content, as well as supporting over 40 languages and country combinations. Platform and creative intelligence can also be used as part of your user's journey, using the platform triggers as they progress through the funnel to pass that data to your creative for the frameworks to adapt and assemble a new creative concept that speaks to the user in the right time in their journey. Think of a user looking for flights. You may have picked up this user through prospecting, then looking at flights and finally booking. During the phases, we can show them different creatives at the platform level, but maybe at the end of that journey, we know they're booked and ready to go. Can we use our creative to take this information and inform the user of things like flight delays, weather, or even events in real time? There are times when we need that extra bit of control over our creative and real-time content. So to try and help, what we can add is the ability within our framework to turn on and off the real-time content that populates the creative or simply override it. We have worked with a number of clients that use their data feed to populate the creative with relevant targeted content for users based on their view or purchase history, or maybe it was trending products. But in some cases, we might want to switch off this real-time content and replace it with blanketed offer messaging across all creatives and all users or audiences to notify them of last-minute flash sales, price drops, or just even holiday events like Black Friday sales. Planning for this in advance means that within the creative framework's logic and intelligence, we can make this one-time simple change to update all versions versus having to go in and update each version one by one, or worse, create new concepts that we need to swap in and out of our tags. We mentioned earlier about achieving scale and that careful considerations need to be put into your framework and understanding of the available assets and data. It is key in the planning stages to plan out how you will manage your content for scalability and, of course, your campaign lifecycle, as this will provide a roadmap to your teams and clients on how we will maintain the creative adaptability for an always-on approach and keep it relevant for the best performance. Scalability in an always-on world is key in your planning if you want to create those efficiencies and cost management in your campaign. Once you have created your framework, built out your asset library, mapped out your creatives and messaging to your audiences, this is not the end. We may have weekly updates to manage, monthly or quarterly creative updates, last-minute messaging based on industry or global trends. But as your campaign progresses over its life cycle, you still want to keep it fresh for the users and adapt to their behaviors, circumstances, and even time like holidays or yearly events. What can help is to work with your teams to create annotated documents of your creative frameworks that build out a spec guide for future designs and iterations that acts as kind of like a blueprint for the next update. As we see too many times that clients sometimes design new concepts or creatives that don't align or fit into the current frameworks. While we can make it flexible, there are still some guidelines to follow around the limitations. Think collaboration plus annotation equals scalability. We now live in a world where we can talk about user attention spans, shorter bites of information, getting things done quicker, cheaper, better, to a more hyper-targeted user in the right time, circumstance, and environment. So we need to adapt our thinking to try and streamline our approach. The key takeaways from this are: we need to expand our creative brief to factor in time and circumstance to create the right personalized approach, by planning and communication involving all teams from the onset to understand the goal and objectives of the campaign. Rules and guidelines, mapping out the creative to understand its limits and its flexibilities. Annotation, which we just spoke about, but creating detailed annotated documents as a guide for your teams to understand the specifications of the creative content. Creative messaging strategy, having a clear strategy on the various messaging options as well as understanding the data triggers. And finally, scalability. Teams should know the longevity of a campaign to factor in time and relevance based on when and for how long the campaign will run. In conclusion, brilliance demands balance. The battle between data and creative continues. For a while, data was winning, but the creative pendulum of power has since swung back to the creative. Now it's time for the creatives in the world to embrace data to create balance. Data is the key to unlocking what is truly motivating audiences' decisions, informing media placement, and optimizing your message. Conceptual creative thinking capitalizes on consumer insights and adds the human touch. We can create the most amazing ideas and concepts, but without partnering with data to help our creative navigate through the noise of today's speed and visual world, you will be lost. Take advantage of the new technologies as the vessels that can get you to your consumers, but just make sure that they are fueled by the right data to help you and your consumers complete their journey. Today, what we have explored is part of Flash Talking's operating model for personalization. which commits to 4 essential phases in completing 12 process steps, from initiate to planning, through implementation, and finally launch. If you're interested in learning more about our operating model and taking a deeper dive, please reach out to our sales team who can help you get started. Thank you very much for today's webinar. I'm Garrett Doyle, VP of Creative Services at Flashtalking.